I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
And now the plain truth. As you've seen on our show, the government at times tells you lies. The government needs to be exposed because it cannot be trusted to expose itself.
If it's the bad guys, it's those foreign terrorists, then it's okay. It's not like my government would ever do it to me. But guess what? You're wrong, because your government would totally do that to you, and now they'll be able to by law.
The Patriot Act permits federal agents to
search everything.
There are provisions of the Patriot Act which have been implemented in secret. That is to say that you or I, as a citizen, do not know what necessarily we're doing to break the law because they've made the actual violation secret.
The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA. Essentially, this extends the government's power to warrantlessly wiretap Americans.
Documents just released indicate police departments across the country do track cell phones without bothering to get any permission from a court.
Because it's not just cell phones we're talking about. It's also, we've got like an Android pad or Kindle, depending on the model, or an iPad 3G or something that's talking to the carriers on the network. This can be tracked as well.
The ACLU saying in the report this has become big business for service providers.
The FBI claims people on this cell have no right to privacy.
Liberty, privacy, overrated. U.S. Constitution, overrated.
Your medical records are for your and your doctor's eyes only, right? Not if the Drug Enforcement Administration gets its way.
Department of Homeland Security has ruled that searches and seizures of any and all electronic devices by Customs and Border Patrol is not a violation of a person's privacy. And here's the best part. The searches are allowed to be completely suspicionless, and they apply to anyone within a 100-mile radius of the borders. According to the ACLU, 190 million Americans fall within this 100-mile radius.
Going through the court system, getting a warrant, all that stuff is just so tedious.
Just signed into law by the president, H.R. 347 gives federal agents sweeping powers to arrest and bring felony charges against citizens engaged in protests where the Secret Service is present.
The Department of Homeland Security has launched a research project to find ways of hacking into gaming consoles.
Law that would say that social networks, etc., have to build in backdoors for government surveillance.
A system to monitor blogs, message boards, and social media sites like Twitter, Facebook.
To monitor for criticism, to monitor for dissent.
So I'll give you an example of some of the, words that set the alarms for the Department of Homeland Security. Drill, exercise, airport.
Exercise, okay. Well, why don't you just go ahead and waste all of our time and our money going after that?
Internal security emails expose that America's surveillance network is, quote, more for activists than terror threats.
It's called CISPA, or the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protect Act. It would allow companies to collect and monitor private communications and then share them with the government or anybody else. A company like Google, Facebook, Twitter, or AT&T could intercept your emails and text messages, send copies to one another and to the government, and modify those communications or prevent them from reaching their destination.
So in the end, if they pass this, they might have the same effect in terms of shutting down our sites, and they also have the second effect of merging business and state even further together.
There are a lot of folks who stand to benefit from comprehensive cybersecurity legislation, especially if that legislation comes attached with big spending.
ISP will be spying, not just on your bandwidth, but specifically on what you are downloading. You are giving them an unfettered, unchecked right to cut off your service based upon the claims of copyright holders who have been shown time and time and time again to make false claims.
But today's surveillance age, experts say, is a reality almost no one can escape.
The ACLU's most recent info sheet says that 1.7 billion, with a B, emails, phone calls, and text messages are being intercepted and stored by the U.S. government.
The federal government tracking your kids. The Department of Education recently taking steps to make it easier for states to share the personal information of fellow students.
A lawsuit alleges teachers spy on kids undressing through school-supplied laptop webcams.
Now they are putting in chips into household appliances that could then be tracked later. So your fridge, maybe your microwave, your stove, your dishwasher.
Verizon has filed a patent for a cable box equipped with a microphone and sensors to record what you're doing. And that's not all. This technology would be able to communicate with your phone to see what you've been browsing on your mobile device.
It's being called intelligent CCTV, surveillance cameras that can pick out suspicious behavior in a crowd.
The secret program is known as Trapwire.
Stratford kind of touting this program is kind of like the be-all to end-all of Big Brother. Like, this was it. This is how we're going to be able to watch everyone.
Somebody can press a button and determine everywhere I've been, everything I've done, everyone I've been with.
The U.S. government stepping up efforts to spy on its citizens with a new defense software able to predict people's future behavior and locations.
Riot can map and analyze your locations, ultimately building a profile of your activities and movements. Later in the process, your relationships are analyzed, and in the end, you're assigned a risk level. And if Raytheon is to be believed, they certainly did not want the demo out there, requesting to The Guardian that it not be posted online.
They're building this giant data center in Utah that is costing $2 billion, that is designed to set up every piece of communication, certainly in the United States, and they hope all across the world.
The national intelligence boss somehow claims spying on everyone is practical and effective, but an independent probe found the exact opposite.
The government taking a big new step, looking to build a huge database of people's physical characteristics. The FBI is taking on a $1 billion project to gather fingerprints, palm patterns, even digital pictures of faces. Eventually, it could expand to include iris patterns, face shape patterns, scars, even information about how you walk and talk. It's called biometrics.
New York City's police department is just one of many law enforcement agencies that also requires citizens to undergo an iris scan before being released from police custody. Face recognition and iris scanning are the current tools of the trade. However, scientists are reportedly developing new technology aimed at identifying anyone from much greater distances.
I'm talking about new laser scanner capable of detecting every tiny trace of any substance on your body. It's expected to be implemented at airports and border crossings across the country in the next year or so.
That voice you hear,
your attention please,
came from this streetlight. LED video screens and cameras, it even counts people for police. They can even take my picture. The system is also capable of recording conversations.
A police force able to figure out what criminals are going to do in advance.
FAST stands for Future Attribute Screening Technology. Future attributes. Not the attributes you have now, the attributes you're gonna have and will be punished for later.
It will monitor, among other things, body movements, voice pitch changes. It'll also look at eye movements, body heat changes, and breathing patterns. And they're gonna use all this information to try to predict whether or not you're gonna commit a crime in the future, okay?
So watch out how you move your eyes, and if you're breathing too hard, it might cause you a problem.
Police in Santa Cruz, California are getting closer to the sci-fi thriller Minority Report, where cops picked up criminals before they committed their crime. And now major cities across the country, including Los Angeles, are working to start similar programs.
After a decade of judges handing out tougher and longer sentences, America's prison population is going the same direction as the price of food and gas. That is to say, way up. But what may be even more surprising is that government is increasingly outsourcing prisons and prisoners to the private sector. Colorado is at the center of this controversy over incarceration for profit, a practice that's happening all over the country.
The more people they lock up and the longer they keep them, the more money they make.
In 2010, the police gave 300,000 Class C misdemeanors to children as young as 6 in the state of Texas.
They do have police departments inside the schools. Why? Because the 6-year-olds are about to riot? No, because they make money off of it.
So private prisons, they're like businesses. Of course they want to, make as much money as possible. But think about how that affects you as a citizen of the United States, okay? They're looking to put people away for minor offenses, okay, for anything. That's why this war on drugs continues. It's because it's big business for these private jails, for these private prisons.
Mandatory sentencing guidelines for federal crimes, in a lot of instances, judges don't really have a lot of leeway. There's a mandatory sentence for each crime, and they have to go with that.
You know what's criminal? What our government is doing to its citizens. That's what's criminal.
They're saying that creating a fake profile on MySpace was a felony
because it violated the terms of service of MySpace. Who hasn't violated terms of service of the hundreds of things you've signed up to online? Are you positive you haven't violated any of them? Since the law is so broad that almost anybody can be prosecuted on this, they selectively prosecute the people they don't like. You can do wire fraud with the largest drug cartels and terrorists in the world, but don't you dare violate a term of service with a private corporation. because then the government will come to get you.
This time it's the prosecution's attempt to seize a man's motel. The government wanted to take the property in Tewksbury, Massachusetts, because people chose to deal drugs there.
We want to intimidate you, we want to bully you, we want to pressure you, we want to break you. That's the government we have. And this is how we become a police state, where we privatize our prisons, and then they buy our politicians, and they have the motivation to arrest us all.
The National Defense Authorization Act. It gives the military the power to indefinitely detain American citizens, even those captured here in the United States, suspected, just suspected, not convicted, of some sort of involvement or affiliation with terrorism. So no trial. Prison based solely on suspicion.
The small size of MAVs allows them to be hidden in plain sight. Once in place, an MAV can enter a low-powered extended surveillance mode for missions lasting days or weeks. Small size and agile flight will enable MAVs to covertly enter locations inaccessible by traditional means of aerial surveillance. Multiple MAVs, each equipped with small sensors, will work together to survey a large area. Information from these sensors will be combined, providing the swarm of MAVs with a big picture point of view. Individual MAVs may perform direct attack missions and can be equipped with incapacitating chemicals, combustible payloads, or even explosives for precision targeting capability. MAVs will become a vital element in the ever-changing warfighting environment and will help ensure success on the battlefield of the future. Unobtrusive, pervasive, lethal, micro-air vehicles, enhancing the capabilities of the future warfighter.
And now it looks like domestic drone use is going to come to an airspace near you. So that means that by September 30th, 2015, drones will be flying in the same airspace as airliners, cargo planes, business jets, and private aircraft, as the Associated Press described it.
This has been a very partisan Congress. They can't agree to do anything. And yet, it seems like over the past few months, they've really been hell-bent on taking away Americans' rights. And I don't know why that is. It is stunning how little national debate there is.
The thing is, you also have to realize that it's all part of the bigger picture. It's all connected.
Who profits from a lack of discussion from these things? That's the key. And we'll never know if the captive media doesn't tell us.
The mainstream media should realize, above all, that we have certain laws and standards for a reason in this country.
This should be a dinner table conversation. Every American should be asking, should we be spending billions of dollars on these things when people are out of work, when our infrastructure is failing, and when other economies like China are, steaming ahead and we're falling behind? Is this really what we should be spending our money on, spying on our own people?
So the fact that they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars just to go after 7 people that are in charge of a foreign website.
But the problem is most people don't know, and those who do know don't necessarily care.
Goodness gracious, indefinite, preemptive, or endless detention surely doesn't apply to U.S. citizens unless current or future president says so. Don't you worry a bit.
If you're not doing anything, you might say, I'm not doing anything, I don't care. Well, should we just throw out the whole Constitution? Should we just run by a new set of rules?
We're more than a decade out from 9/11. We've killed Osama bin Laden. We have killed or detained most of his deputies. So the real question becomes, who are we fighting against?
As much as we all want the country to be safe, want the authorities to be on top of it, are we really willing to have the government consider each and every one of us a terrorist? Because you see, that's essentially what's happening.
I think the average person out there thinks that this is only being used to pursue radical Islam and these terrorist groups, but they don't need a law like this to go after 150 or 200 people. This is being used on tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of Americans, where they just go on these fishing expeditions looking for stuff.
Some of the things that make you suspicious of terrorism are having food, having more than 7 days of food, missing fingers on your hand, having ammunition, having weatherproofed ammunition, having several guns at your house.
That's right. People who pay for small purchases in cash, like coffee or gum, apparently that's a big red flag. Big time. So you should be careful of those that are overly concerned about their privacy. And that is the exact language in the FBI pamphlet. And attempting to shield your computer screen from other patrons, well, that's a sure sign that you're suspicious.
The threat comes from what it calls right-wing extremists in this country. The report says people who are opposed to restricting Second Amendment rights to bear arms or who are concerned about illegal immigration and border security could well fall under the Department of Homeland Security definition of an extremist.
Homeland Security report that links right-wing extremists with military veterans, supporters of border security, and advocates for gun rights.
If you use a cell, a computer, or walk outside, the FBI now considers you a terrorist suspect with no right to privacy.
Despite the fact that there's no relation to any terrorist activity or investigation, the government has decided that they want to keep all that data that they have about you anyway, because you never know when you're going to need it somewhere down the line.
You're treated as a criminal, and you have to prove yourself innocent.
We keep everyone's data. We make the company store everyone's information for the government because anyone might be guilty.
It is the complete reverse of what the American justice system is supposed to be.
Unless they suspect me of a crime, the police do not need to follow me. That's why they need probable cause. And people say, what do you have to hide? I don't have anything to hide, but the police don't need to follow me if they have no reason to think that I'm in Al-Qaeda.
It was actually an undercover agent who posed as an Al-Qaeda operative, provided everything he needed, provided the bomb, provided the transportation, provided the money, and that allowed him to commit this crime. The FBI gets $3 billion from Congress to fight counterterrorism, and the FBI can't spend $3 billion and go back to Congress and say, hey, we spent all your money and we didn't find any terrorists. These sting operations provide a very convenient mechanism for the FBI to show the Congress and the people and the public, hey, we're keeping you safe. Here's a terrorist attack that was thwarted.
All of you need to step back from the post-9/11 world of fear and paranoia that allows for the laws to be stretched and bent and decimated. And all of you need to come back to reality.
If you are pulled off the street tomorrow and they call you an alien or an undocumented immigrant or an unlawful enemy combatant, exactly how are you going to convince them to give you a court hearing to prove you are not? Do you think this Attorney General is going to help you?
The Constitution says if the government wants your life or your liberty or your property, it has to articulate to a jury what law you have violated and prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt to that jury. It's called due process. Without due process, the government could take anything it wanted and kill anybody it wanted.
This intercept operator's testimony confirms the real target is ordinary Americans.
After a few days, he said he didn't want to do it anymore, didn't think it was right, so they got somebody else to do it. There's a lot of intimidation, and people just follow orders.
Well, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, along with the U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Office, have placed a large and rather interesting order.
The Department of Homeland Security buying ammunition, now looking to purchase another 21 million rounds of ammunition. This in addition, of course, to the 1.6 billion rounds that Homeland Security has bought in just the past 10 months.
This is not the Pentagon making the order for the military. It's DHS and ICE.
Now, to put all of this in perspective, the military used approximately 70 million rounds each year of the Iraq War. 70 million rounds in a war.
There are only about 311 million people living in the entire country, so it begs the question, why such a massive order?
The Department of Homeland Security isn't fighting in Afghanistan or Libya or Iraq. The Department of Homeland Security is here in the United States. So the billions of rounds of .40 caliber Shredder ammunition that they've recently bought over the last year or so are meant for one thing, use in the borders of the United States. All these other agencies that are loading up on ammunition, they're not using these in foreign wars. So where on earth are they going to use them? These are targets called no more hesitation targets, very lifelike. And what do they look like? You have a pregnant woman holding a pistol. You have a little boy holding a pistol. You have a mom and her child standing in a park. And you have Granny in her bathrobe on the porch of her house pointing a gun. They're made for one reason and one reason only. So by the name gives it away. No more hesitation. So law enforcement agents and DHS agents can get the real life feeling of a citizen pointing a gun at them. Couple this with the other things we talked about. This is when soft tyranny turns into hard tyranny. It isn't a question of if, it's a matter of when.
We're rapidly militarizing our domestic law enforcement officers, and I think a lot of people are scared. TSA is scary enough. Wait until they all have guns.
The federal government has spent $34 billion on militarizing our local police enforcement.
The police forces in the United States have been increasingly weaponized with similar equipment to that of the U.S. military.
Call me crazy, but these devices need to be left to the military for war situations, not to use against Americans for domestic purposes. And of course, if you throw the words national security or terrorism in there, everyone acts like it's no big deal.
Even though these police departments don't need this equipment, they will still use it, and they'll use it for stupid things. Like, for instance, they'll go to raid a party, for instance, right?
With a tank.
No, but this is happening throughout the country, right? Like, this is a police state. You know, our police enforcement is militarized, so they'll overreact to stupid situations.
And to give all of these agents so much firepower, it really does make you wonder if they know something that the American people do not know about.
They're talking about inserting the Army into domestic law enforcement. Senator Lindsey Graham, who supports this bill, says, quote, the homeland is part of the battlefield, and people can be held without trial, whether an American citizen or not.
Are you slightly uncomfortable with the idea that the United States president, whoever it may be, can decide that this or that U.S. citizen is a threat to national security and kill them?
Just so I understand correctly, are you really saying that in certain situations the president can decide whether it's in the best interests of the nation and then do something illegal?
I'm saying that when the president does it, that means it's not illegal.
I never broke the law! I am the law!
That is quite a horrifying reality of how our government functions these days, of how completely out of hand this war on terror has become.
No, it's okay. We changed the law so that what was previously illegal is now legal, so I feel better.
The government does not need clear evidence to justify a deadly attack.
They can execute you, and we just had another ruling saying, well, even though it clearly seems to violate the Constitution, yep, that's what we're going to continue to do. Welcome to Obama's America, which seems startlingly similar to the Bush America.
Several US citizens have already been assassinated. Here, Black Hawks fly low on downtown Miami, strafing highways with machine gun fire in what authorities call a practice run.
The Constitution guarantees due process. It does not guarantee judicial process.
Because the main threat is you.
Now more than ever, we need you to act. Our enemies are moving in, and they anticipate us not having the numbers to resist. It is up to you to prove them wrong. Get this message out, and wake up the patriots! I don't need to remind you what would happen should we fail. One of these days could be our last. By helping and taking action and contributing to the cause, you'll be remembered as taking a stand against the gray state before it completely destroys everything we know. Either stand now or kneel forever!